I'd like to introduce and invite first John Radermacher, City Administrator at the City of Cannon Falls. Uh, Introduce yourself, your organization, and what about the specific data center project in Cannon Falls have you been engaged in? How's the city been engaged? And I know you do have a few slides that help us kind of visualize some of this. So, handing it over to you, John, for your introduction.
All right, thank you, Benya. Yes, I'm John Rademacher, and the city administrator here in Cannon Falls, Minnesota, in Goodhue County, right on the border of Dakota County. I started about a year ago, which was actually after some of the original engagement with the data center developers started for our community. And on in our group is Laura Qualley. She's contracted with the city of Cannon Falls. She works for CETA. She has been a part of the city for the entire kind of stage of when the initial public announcement of a data center development started. So she's certainly knows going back to those very early stages. But as I started, this was something that the city knew was happening. So it was from day one of my involvement with the city, we've been kind of knowing that this is coming. So it's been a big thing for us and trying to figure out things a lot on the fly, but also understanding what the state processes are regarding these reviews and what we wanted to ensure was going to take place as we evaluated the project and whether or not it was going to, suit our community. So I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'm gonna quick just pull up a couple of slides just to kind of give you kind of a background in terms of how we got to where we did.
And John, as you're pulling that up, can you also just clarify the like how large is the data center project that is
Sure.
proposed?
So our facility that we were looking at, we did have an AUAR study done, and at the very early stages, they were looking at something that could be on a 250-acre campus that would have potentially 7 buildings that maybe could, or up to, I think at early stages it was maybe even 10 buildings, but it was up to like 1.7 million square feet of construction. As we've further then refined where things are going to end up, we're still in the same acreage for the site development, but it's smaller, down to probably only 1.2 million square feet for actual development. And that was in part due to as the project development, developed some of the land use restrictions that took place.
Mhm.
So I think as we move forward, a big thing is what, how we got where we are, and when did we start to kind of really start sharing the information and trying to figure out what happened. What were some of the major phases of that decision making? I think will be beneficial for communities that are also going through, potentially going through some of these activities. And then for us, it was like, what were the critical things that we had? My very last slide is I called it the non-negotiables, the things that our city, our community, we did not want to back down from this to ensure that as this project moved forward. And we were very clear with the developer from the get-go with some of those things. Some things developed as we progressed because we gathered more information and learned some more new things. But for us, being upfront about that was really important because as we move through, I wanted the developer to know from the community perspective, if you cannot meet these requirements or restrictions or capacities that we have, then maybe we're not the right fit for you. And if you move on, then you move on. So, and one thing I want to start, I didn't actually incorporate it into the slides, but I want to speak to it. The site that actually got developed was explored for a couple other very large projects. One of them was actually initiated and contacted by deed at the state, and with because of that, that really informed a bit of how we wanted to move forward because we gathered a lot of information about that site for that project. However, there were some things that we knew we didn't know, and we wanted to ensure that we had very solid information, and that was really around the water capacity and sewer capacity that we had. And so right from the get-go, it was discussed to do an escrow agreement with the developer, and would allow for the city to use that escrow money to pay for our consultants, any, additional studies or anything that was related to the development of this project, so that at the end, even if it wasn't going to be successful, which, previous projects weren't, there's a lot of uncertainty as we're exploring and trying to find out and determine whether this project is going to work within, the non-negotiables that we had. We didn't want to be left with spending thousands of dollars of the city's money to try to determine those things. So that was really important and valuable from the developer to recognize that as well and be very open and willing to help fund that. So, that was I kind of missed that inclusion, but I wanted to emphasize that point because it really, in the end for us, it really helped in the negotiation process. So as you can see, back in October was kind of the first announcements. We knew this was site that was going to be annexed, and we knew it was going to require an AUAR right from the get-go. So, and it was going to be a large-scale AUAR. So we actually had a public comment period for the scoping plan, as well as a public comment period on the AUAR itself. I felt with the process of the AUAR, it was very widespread in terms of everything that it was analyzing, much to what Catherine was speaking to what an EIS does. I thought that they definitely evaluated a lot of those different aspects, power, the electricity, the emissions, the water, the migratory animals, the archaeological records from the area. A lot of variety of different things went into that study, which also then helped us guide the documents that we ultimately came to an agreement with as we move through this timeline. So really about that May, June was when we really started ramping up the more of the conversations. Throughout all of this, we had a number of, I think it was ended up being 7 different joint work sessions or work sessions with either the council and planning commission in the community. We had actually previous slide, there was a community meeting hosted by the developer. Tract was the developer for our project. That was held in April, right at the time when the public comment period was before the public comment period was starting. So we had probably 80 to 100 people come to that community meeting and received a lot of information from the developer. So as we move forward, all of these joint work sessions were public, they're recorded, not maybe decisions weren't made at those meetings, but it was really to try to ensure that as we progress, like that information was made out into the public and informed to everybody. So as we've finished, we do YouTube, record our meetings and then post them to YouTube. A lot of times we were able to live stream. Some we weren't able to live stream just through technology issue at the time, but that's been corrected. So you can still find them on our site, and we tried to post to some of the critical ones that had a lot of really valuable information as we came to, discover and learn more about what the specifics were. But then as we kind of final through, we did have to do an ordinance amendment, and I think this is a critical step as well for us. We did not have data centers as a defined use anywhere within our ordinance structure. So as we crafted that, we did it on the basis that data centers could be utilized as a conditional use, which creates a different, an increased level of authority for the city to permit or revoke permits if conditions are not met. So with that, we were very much emphasizing that, recognizing, yes, there isn't maybe one overarching organization that reviews, evaluates, and permits these things. It is a lot of different folks. One of the consultants and consultant engineers talked about 34 potential agencies that are going to have a part of the review in this process. And we wanted to ensure that those all needed to be met as the developments were going to be moving forward. So as we said, evaluated the project and created the land use regulations and ultimately the development agreement for what we were going to allow for to take place within our community. That recognition that there's still additional approvals that are going to need to be made and done not just at the local level but the state level after the fact, those all needed to ensure that they were going to take place, or the potential for revoking the CUP was going to be could be invoked.
Hmm.
So, it's the September, October, a lot of things happening as we get into those final stages for the land use and development agreements. And then community benefit agreement was brought up. You can kind of almost look at that as the association between what we defined as our development agreement and what ultimately created some of those community benefit things for us. And I can speak more to those specific terms a little bit later. So here's where I think for us and any city that maybe potentially is going to look at these, or any government agency that would have an impact in looking at this, you're for a city for sure, you're likely going to have to look at potentially annexation because of where these developments might be. They're not likely going to be in your central downtown district because of the large scope of them. You may not have industrial parks that have the adequate space to host very large ones. The AUAR process that we went through was known to us right away that this was going to be required. This was brought up very early in as the public engagement about this project. We actually did the RGU agreement because the study was going to start before the annexation was complete, which is a valid process. This is not something to try to pass the buck, but the land being in the township ultimately getting annexed into the city, the AUAR process does allow for that transfer through a joint resolution between government agencies for that responsible government unit. So we had that completed in advance of moving forward with the AUAR. Then for us, I think this was a really critical and positive thing, and where that escrow agreement came in super well was we wanted to understand what our existing city capacity had for very specifically the water and sewer needs, because as we heard, or it was indicated from the developer, that water interest in water was important. And this was the point in which we said we need to verify what this is. We want to do a thorough study. We want our engineers to do this, not yours. So with that, we did amend our escrow agreement to pay for these studies. So the developer agreed to that, and it were about $32,000 of studies to study both our water distribution systems as well as our wastewater equipment and capacity. So this really helped kind of set the tone for further negotiations in terms of what those development agreement things were going to be and what the capacity for water use was. So we then said, this is our kind of a line in the sand. If you want anything from the city and you don't want to pay for additional infrastructure, that you are going to cover this cost, you are going to work within the confines of our capacity. And that isn't just the confines of our capacity as what this study is saying. We have up to 100 million gallons of water a year that we can allocate. We are preserving that portion of that. We are planning for growth and development within our community to ensure that we're not sacrificing our future just to give capacity to you, which may be tied up for decades and may not be in a development that comes to your fullest fruitions of what you're asking for. So we wanted to ensure that we knew what an additional allotment would be, and anything beyond that needed to come with payment for any infrastructure development that would need to take place in order to provide that capacity, added capacity. Then it was really involved in determining the land use applications. That was for us is the regulatory zoning rules. There are additional processes to that, going from the development of that CUP amendment for data centers to plan unit developments, which overlay different restrictions, which actually create more restrictive land use on our sites for an industrial zoned area. It does also create a little bit added flexibility or leniency in some regards. Specifically for us, it was around building height and fence height. Those are really only the two where we got very specifically more lax. The rest of it got more restrictive, establishing far greater setbacks and establishing higher level of landscaping plan and plantings and other things that could create this vegetative buffer, because where the site is going to be developed, there is a residential neighborhood nearby with about 15 total homes. So they're not in the city limits, but we were mindful in our conversations with the township to ensure that they were protected as well as they could be. Then, we moved into also or kind of simultaneously once the land use had been started, moving into those development agreements in terms of determining what is your ask for water for distribution and what is your ask for water treatment as that water is completed. So, what are, and how are those going to fit within our capacity? Then we had our series of public hearings as well that you'll have to likely go through. So, addition to the CUP, PUD, our ordinances created or created limitations in the terms of the time in which a project gets approval and it has to be complete. This project is planned in phases that could go for 10 years, which our restriction was 1 year for certain planned unit development approvals. So we needed to create those variances to allow for the phase development to take place over time. So that's really where the areas in which variances came into play. So, moving outside of what our rules state, specifically for this project. And then the finals were with the plat and then the rezoning of the property, because as something came in, we have a process in which it's rezoned. So really those other hearings are very, very formal. The crux of it was it really in that CUP negotiations, the PUD negotiations, and then the variances that were going to be allotted. Once those complete the planning commission, then it moves into the discussions that happened at the council level. So those are, kind of the critical things, but a lot of them, as you saw in the timeline, may have happened at different times or multiple times, even when we're dealing with ordinance amendment. So for us, again, the interest in investing in that site, we wanted to make sure that the impact was not going to be detrimental to our community. That was, determined very heavily in terms of the understanding for water use and sewer capacity for treating that water. Those are the things that we would be providing as the utility owner. In we do not have a municipal electric utility. Dakota Electric is a co-op that will be serving this site. So they were involved in conversations with the developer as long as we had been, and potentially earlier. So there's a lot that they had to work through with them. But in the end, what we wanted to ensure is that our ratepayers were not going to be paying for this. They came to us. We did not seek them out. They came to the city. They're looking at developing this site, and they're upfront about it being a data center. We wanted to ensure, can you stay within these capacities? Because then that doesn't add infrastructure costs. There is infrastructure that will need to be built because it is in a newly annexed area, so we don't have mains and other pipe in the ground to necessarily serve that. They are 100% paying for that in terms of the development agreement. There's different right-of-way accesses that they need for turn lanes and getting onto the site, as it's just a field right now with a couple limited access points. So as it gets developed, it needed further. So those need to be paid for by the developer. And then for us, where we kind of went above and beyond with them is that one of the things that came out and was identified wasn't necessarily because of the project, but this area of our community for our water distribution is not served from gravity-fed water storage tanks or a water tower or an in-ground tank. It is actually from booster pumps that come right off of our wells, which aren't too far. So that zone is pressurized through booster pumps, not through gravity-fed towers, which created for us we thought was an area of risk, especially when we're talking about large-scale development and the access to fire protection that creates. So what we asked for was that as this development moves forward, we would like to see a water tower built. Would you dedicate an area of land for us to build that tower? And that was agreed upon. And as you're, a large part of why this is happening, if you are not, because you are there, we would look at building a tower. So is there a dollar amount that we can agree upon in which you're contributing to that investment in the tower? If you are not there, there's a dollar amount that the city is going to spend in terms of providing water and fire protection and various things to serve this area. Those two numbers are going to be way far apart. So what we said is this is what the city is willing to invest. This is what we anticipate the cost of a tower is going to be at the time in which it would be needed for your to align with your construction. Would you pay that? And that's what was agreed upon, and that total was $5 million. Additionally, on the wastewater side, we have a plant that's 25 years old. We know that it's going to be needing upgrades. Those upgrades are in part paid for through user rates from our existing users. As they're coming in, they were going to be a significant industrial user to our site if they were going to utilize the water in which they're asking for. And they asked and wanted to not have to pay a separate rate or a higher rate just to, cover these costs, have it built in. They wanted to be in the same kind of rate structure as everybody else. And in order for us to be willing to do that, we wanted them to invest into our system so that they were paying a portion of what their utilization of our capacity would be as those future improvements were made. So that was what we had petitioned and asked for, and they also agreed to that, which equated to 1.6 million. So where finally the kind of the biggest aspect of this project for us in terms of just community benefit need was that we knew we were going to receive increased taxable value. That's going to have a great benefit to our community because of the annexation and that serves our city. However, our school district was not going to be a part of the territory in which was being annexed. It was being annexed in a different county from a township that served a different school district, even though the site is a lot closer to our school than it is to that other school. So that was a kind of a point of contention and concern for the community, and that was something that we really wanted to make sure was incorporated into the agreements. And fortunately, in the end, we said, this is something that while we can't direct it to you, you need to be aware that in order to benefit this community, which you're touting right from the get-go, saying all these positive things that it will bring. You need to recognize how and find a way that you're going to help our school district out because they're not going to see the tax benefit. So they did find a way to build that in for us in this what we call the payment in lieu of taxes. So very much back to the non-negotiables. We were going to go through our process. We were not going to skip steps. We're not going to go around anything, take shortcuts. We were going to follow our process is to the best of our abilities within the time, resources, and everything that we had available to us, which thanks to the escrow agreement helped a lot because I could have a team with me of people that have a lot of knowledge and experience in areas that I'm not an expert. And that was helpful. In terms of transparency, we were very clear from them that these we would have public meetings where approvals need to be made. Nothing was going to be done in the background. We were not presenting to the council or planning commission something that it is all hammered out and done, and you have no more input. That was hence all the public work sessions, so they were well aware of where things were going and what we were trying to discuss and fine tune and refine. So that was really important to us. By the way, we had no NDAs on this project. That was clear set from my predecessor, who retired, and I took over and very much engaged in the same practice. This in our government, we did not think NDA was going to be something that was appropriate for this project. Mm-hmm. The other thing that we were just very clear about from the get-go was no direct incentives from the city, no tax abatements, no TIF districts. This is something if you are developing in this large scale and you are pledging all of these things and you're 100% pay for this infrastructure, we didn't feel like it was ever justified. You'd have a need for our subsidies. So we were very clear with the developer that needs to be, do not even ask. And they haven't. And then again, at the end, we wanted to ensure that this was no direct cost to the city. The escrow agreement is going to pay for, if this isn't going to work out, what are we going to lose in the end? In the end, we're going to lose time. We were going to spend a lot of time in these conversations, but no direct cost to the city. If it does move forward, we get to a point where we got through the annexation, we want to ensure, well, and then the project doesn't move forward after that or doesn't get the approvals after that. We want to ensure that the annexation was gonna stay in place and that site could be developed because back to the very start, the site had been looked at at least 2 other times for development. So it wasn't likely going to be from the landowner farm fields in the long future or near future. So for us, that was really, I think, important and valuable in terms of how the process moved forward. And, in the end, we did have everything that received its land use and development agreement approvals at the final meeting on this in November. So next steps are we move into final plat approvals and other site plan approvals. So this isn't the end people have asked me, in terms of the project, well, is this the end? I mean, is city ever going to have any say in this, or we're just going to see, construction equipment going on? And the answer is no. There's going to be additional approvals. It's now we've set the guardrails, the foundation. We've set the path for if a development is going to happen. Those are the things that are going to happen within the development, and they have to prove that every time that they take these next steps that they're going to meet those conditions.